So, April 16th, 2020, pretty much the peak of the curve of the coronavirus. I've spent quite a lot of time in the last month looking into this because I like to inform myself. I'm also very skeptical and tend not to believe whatever the loudspeakers that are blasting are telling us. The reason I tend not to believe them is because I'm old enough to remember very clearly how many times they have lied about things that they like to brand as conspiracy theories, which is a CIA phrase that was coined to dismiss and smear and disparage anyone who thought that JFK was not murdered by Lee Harvey Oswald, and that it was impossible for Oswald to shoot JFK from the front as well as from the back. And so there's a lot of evidence that what the loudspeakers, which is the mainstream media and the government, have told us about that is a lie. There's a lot of evidence that explains and reveals that what we've been told about 9/11 was a lie. If you really think that 9/11 was really just 19 Saudis taking down 3 towers, then you haven't looked into it. So I'm going to tell you what I have made sense of so far about this virus as someone who has done a layman's research. I am not an expert, but I do know how to inform myself. And one of the things that I've done is I've gone to different sources. The sources that I tend to follow are not sources that are trying to sell me anything. Okay? I go to independent media. There's no advertisements. There's nothing for sale. Okay? So that's very important in terms, for me, about what my sources are. So trying to make sense of this virus thing. So we've got the mainstream. Here's what we're being told. This virus came out of China. That seems to be more or less true. How it got to China, whether it was originated in China, whether the Americans planted it in China, I'm not sure we'll ever know that, and in some ways it doesn't matter. So what does matter? To me, what matters is, and the whole point of making sense of this jigsaw puzzle of evidence, and the evidence is what do you see happening, and who is saying what is all part of the evidence, is trying to put it together and make sense of it so I can decide what to do next. Okay? That might be nothing, it might be something, it might be raising my voice, which is where it has brought me. Is I think we need to question. We need to ask questions. So that's where I'm going with this. So what are some of the questions? Well, as far as coronaviruses go, those happen. I've learned a lot about vaccines, viruses, and in the last month. Is coronavirus and influenza are two different things. There is no vaccine for coronaviruses. This virus is being called SARS-CoV-2 because, like SARS, it was a coronavirus. SARS happened, I think, in 2005, and there is still not a vaccine for that particular virus. So us being told that there's going to be a vaccine for this virus in the next 18 months is very fishy. There are scientists writing papers and speaking on the internet who will give you their expert opinions on vaccines and coronaviruses. Okay, so that's another issue, is the virus itself. Then one of my main questions about this involves the numbers. So the loudspeakers I'm going to keep referring to, which is the same as the mainstream media, which is the same as the corporate-owned mainstream media and the corporate-owned politicians, that is not speculation. There was a law passed that allows corporations to give politicians unlimited amounts of money, at least in the United States. And whatever we're in Canada, whatever the United States is doing, Canada is pretty much doing the same thing. We are part of the empire. The words that cannot be spoken are that the United States is a hegemonic, extremely violent empire that has been more or less controlling the world one way or another since at least the fall of the Berlin Wall, and it goes back to the end of World War II, where the United States, as an unbombed country, established its control over the world through the supremacy of the dollar as the reserve currency. So we have this fear, and the fear is being fed to us in the form of numbers, using numbers. Okay, so here's a question about numbers. Where are the numbers for the seasonal flu? You can look up how many people the seasonal flu infects and kills every year, and you might be surprised at how high those numbers are. In some cases, like Italy, the numbers are about what they are right now for the coronavirus, but they're not being reported. So this is a question. What are the flu numbers, and where are the flu numbers, and how do they relate to the COVID-19 numbers? I have not heard that question answered. Right now, today, April 16th, there are a lot of doctors speaking out who are suggesting that anybody who dies in a hospital where there's a lot of corona, if you are dying from anything resembling a lung infection, you are dying of corona. Okay? And it so happens, if the virologists that I've been listening to are correct, that we all have, just like we all have very low levels of parasites, we also have very low levels of coronaviruses and flu viruses in us at any given time, but those viruses are latent and suppressed by our immune systems. So the best thing you have going for you right now in terms of resilience is a healthy immune system. Okay, so, right, so the questions. So the numbers, what about the numbers? Another big question that has been raised by a doctor, scientist, researcher named Andy Kaufman on the internet is he offers a very clear explanation of how the PCR test works. From his explanation and his opinion is that this is a faulty test. This is a faulty test. How many people have you heard questioning the validity of the test? So if I come and I test you for a coronavirus, I am going to find one, and the test, how he explains the test works is that almost everybody is going to test positive. So what's important isn't that you have some coronavirus, it's how many you have that makes a difference. So having a few suppressed but detectable by the test is one thing. Having a high enough load that you are sick is another thing. So this explains all the asymptomatic people that are walking around, right? How can they have a virus and they have no symptoms, okay? And this explanation explains that, because we all have some coronaviruses. And if the test is faulty, I'm not going to swear on my life that the test is faulty, but if the test is faulty, then all of the numbers are faulty. As far as I can tell, that issue is not being addressed. That question is not being asked by the mainstream, nor is it being answered. We're all assuming that the test is good. But the test is critical. If the test is not good, then the numbers are no good. Then that means the fear is no good. Okay, so we have the numbers of the flu, and then we have the test. So, are there people getting sick? Are there people dying? Yes. We do have a good idea that the people who are dying were close to dying anyway, because they have what are called comorbidities, which means they're diabetic, or they have cancer, or they have heart disease, and it just took something, and it could have been the seasonal flu, to push them over the edge. Okay? So, does that mean that I don't think that the coronavirus is doing all kinds of organ and lung damage? No, it doesn't. But I don't need to answer that question to put my puzzle together. Okay? So I'm trying to put a puzzle together and have it make sense, just like you put a jigsaw puzzle together. So what's important when you put a jigsaw puzzle together is that on the cover of the box is a picture of what your puzzle is going to look like. That allows your brain to see that and make sense of all these mixed up pieces on the table. Your brain says, okay, they do make sense. They're going to look like this picture. Right now, we don't have that picture. But we maybe have enough to put together things. So I happen to spend a fair amount of time reading crime and detective fiction. Okay? And after a while, you get to learn a little bit. So one of the things that investigators do when they're faced with a jumble of evidence, some of it or no evidence, and they just can't make sense of how this crime happened, they do a couple of things. In order, their goal is to catch the criminal and get a conviction. Catching the criminal, you can't put them in jail unless they get convicted. So to get convicted, you need convincing evidence. So I'm trying to look for whatever it is, look at the pieces, and see if they become convincing evidence. So one of the things that happens, one of the most crucial pieces of investigative evidence is motive. What is the motive? So what would be the motive of us being subjected to all this? Well, I can think of a few. And I haven't touched on the economic part, and I will. I've been saying from the beginning that this is more than a disease event, this is an economic event. So right now, the economy is being crushed through this lockdown. It's being crushed. If you needed something to crush the economy, a coronavirus would work very well, because then you need a lockdown. Okay? So if you know anything about the economy, which most people don't, unfortunately, you will know that there were massive bubbles, and these bubbles, according to all the insider experts that I listened to, were ready to pop. They were like a balloon looking for a pin, and they found a shotgun in the form of the coronavirus. So the markets are collapsing, unemployment is rising, our economy is collapsing, which it was going to do anyway, but now very conveniently we have a virus that we can blame for that. Okay. The banks, of all the trillions that the Federal Reserve and the Treasury are coming out with, if you look at that, most of those trillions are going funneled up again, just like they were in 2008, to bail out corporations, zombie corporations. You can look up what that means. It means corporations that can't even pay their debts, that should fail, and instead they're not going to fail. And this, who makes off with most of the money are the people at the top. Okay, at any rate, so another question is, why is Bill Gates in the media so much, and what is he trying to sell us? Well, very clearly he is trying to sell us a vaccine, okay? But not just a voluntary vaccine. This is about control. As Charles Eisenstein writes and speaks about, what is happening right now with this entire scenario is an attempt to tighten the screws and get more control. And that has to do with the American empire recognizing that it's in its last stages, that it's losing control, and a desperate attempt to retain its control, especially on its own people. Okay? So that is also happening, and that would be a big motive, but that's complex. and hard to prove unless you can speak that language. So Bill Gates seems to think we all need a virus, and he has a plan, and a big plan. You can look up, it was something 201 that they ran a simulation of this plan. Just so happens they ran it, I think it was in October or November of 2019, just before this all started, and you can look that up. It's no secret that Bill Gates funds and believes that we should all be vaccinated, okay? And he will stand to make a lot of money. Do I think Bill Gates needs more money or wants more money? No, I don't think this is about money. This is about power, and it's about control, okay? So now suddenly we have a conspiracy. Why would these people be doing this? Well, why did 9/11 happen, right? Why did John F. Kennedy get shot? Why did Robert Kennedy get shot? Why did Martin Luther King get shot? Just because there were some bad guys? So we're talking about corruption here. And I think it's worth talking about corruption and what it is. So there's a rant on the movie Syriana where a corrupt bad guy explains corruption. And he explains that corruption, it's very worth listening to. And he ends up saying corruption is how you win. Okay? That's how they win. That's how you win. You will always win. If you're in a game with someone and you cheat and you lie and you steal, you will always win if they're not. And we have Mike Pompeo, the ex-CIA director, now Secretary of State, on the record. You can see it on YouTube, pretty much boasting about the CIA, saying, and I quote, "We lie, we cheat, we steal." So if you don't think that there's corruption, then I would say you've been living under a rock. Okay, I want to get back to the economy for a moment and the dollar and what is happening with the bubbles and the effect of the Federal Reserve pushing in trillions of dollars into this leaking balloon, trying to keep it inflated. And the result of that is going to be what's called hyperinflation, which happened in Weimar, Germany in 1923, and you can look that up, or it happened in Zimbabwe not very long ago. It happened in Argentina in 01. It's happening in Venezuela right now. And the effect on all of us is that your money, whatever savings or money you have, is going to be worth less. It's going to be worth less. So what happened in Weimar, Germany is people spent their life savings buying a month worth of groceries. Okay? Suddenly you thought you had enough retirement money to get you through the end of your life, and now you have to go back to work. Okay? So that's a big problem. Suddenly you thought you could pay off your mortgage, and now you can't. A very big problem. My theory is that the way things are looking, given the level of fear, is that people are going to be begging for a vaccine and begging for a cure to the economic problem. And guess what? They've got one. And this is no secret either that this is on the agenda of banks. Is you can go study what the Bank of International Settlement says. Just look up cashless society, that they want us to go to a cashless society. What does that mean? That means that, first of all, it conveniently solves the problem of your dollars not being worth anything. So now they're going to issue some kind of cryptocurrency, and which we'll all get a chunk of along with our cards. And you won't be able to come over here anymore and buy a lettuce from me, okay? Because in cash, you're going to have your card. And someone's going to know that you bought a lettuce from me. And they're going to know whether I'm paying taxes on it. They're going to know everything that we do that requires money. Okay? So if that doesn't look like control, then I don't know what control is. Okay? And, by the way, your card won't work unless you get the vaccine. Okay? And Bill Gates is talking about not just giving you a vaccine, but a little electronic ID along with your vaccine. So you can't travel. You can't get gas. You can't buy food unless you do these things. Okay? So, to me, that, if you buy that as the end game, and I do, then everything makes sense, okay? It's just like the detectives find a dead body, they look for motive, and they find out that, the brother-in-law is going to inherit the whole estate and $100 million. Well, suddenly, this guy who looks like he committed suicide, well, maybe he didn't commit suicide. And by the way, did Jeffrey Epstein commit suicide? And what happened to that story? As Brett Weinstein puts it, the Jeffrey Epstein story seems to have committed suicide because it disappeared, because now it's not being talked about anymore. And we have pictures of Bill Gates with Jeffrey Epstein, and we have Prince Andrew with Jeffrey Epstein, and we have Bill Clinton with Jeffrey Epstein. So do you believe that there's no corruption? All from the same loudspeakers. I think of us as being in a zoo. We're the caged zoo animals, and there's loudspeakers, and they're telling us what the world is like. You want to believe them? Go ahead. The fact is, there's holes in the fence, and you can get through it. And right now, the most important thing I think that we can do is to ask questions. Talk to your neighbors. Just get us to stop just believing the single narrative. Okay? I do not claim to know what the truth is. My aim is to get us to ask questions. I don't claim to know the solution to the crime, who the criminals were, and how it all happened. But what detectives do is they ask questions. They interview witnesses. They ask questions. And those questions lead you to evidence. And we need to ask questions. So where are the flu numbers? How do we know the test is good? Because there's credible people saying the test isn't good. And if they are correct, it just blows the lid off this whole thing. Okay? So, do I think we should be locked down? Do I think we should be taking precautions? Probably yes. Because I agree with Nassim Taleb that the risk is so high of people dying that it's worth doing what we're doing right now. And he's been saying that, and the lockdown should have come a lot sooner. Instead, it was allowed to spread. Okay? So was that deliberate? Right now, it's being written off to incompetence, that the CDC and the WHO were incompetent. Well, look at who funds those people. Follow the money. So when the detectives don't have any clue as to how to put this puzzle together, the one thing they do is follow the money. Okay? So you find a dead billionaire on the table who looks like he committed suicide, but there's something suspicious about it because he was a happy guy a few days ago, or he was Jeffrey Epstein in a jail cell in a high-risk place, and suddenly the cameras all broke, if you believe that, and the 2 guards fell asleep, if you believe that. Follow the money. Okay? Who stands to make gazillions of dollars off of what's happening? Well, it's not you and me. Okay? And I don't have any viruses for sale, any vaccines for sale. And I'm not trying to get you to change your currency. But there's someone who is. So, all I'm saying is we need to ask these questions, and we need to ask them now. Because if this comes down the pike, there's no going back. If they want to force your children to get a vaccine, it's going to be too late to start asking questions at that time. The time to ask is before this gets implemented. So my plea is inform yourselves. Listen to Charles Eisenstein. Listen to Andy Kaufman. Listen to Judy Mitrovic, whether you trust her or not. Listen to Nassim Taleb. Listen to the doctors in Europe who are questioning the numbers, and ask questions. Ask questions of your municipal counselors, ask questions of your neighbors, ask questions of your family, and get them to start asking questions. That's the best idea I have right now, because we are not going to win this with guns and violence, not against the U.S. military, not against someone who has attack helicopters, not against a policeman who's pointing his revolver at your head. You are not going to win that. Once that happens, it's too late. So, without getting panicked and stressed, which, by the way, is the worst thing for your immune system, is to be fearful and stressed, and then you are likely for your latent coronaviruses to become active and get a cytokine storm going and inflammation, and then suddenly you're sick. Okay? You want to do that? Great. So all I'm saying is to just look at the evidence, stay calm, and ask questions. And the sooner, the better.